The Philippines wants to forge alliances and modernize its navy to counter the threat of China in the South China Sea. Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro made the case for both on Monday. He said, and I quote, "We will carry it out through a comprehensive re-strategization along with forging alliances. It's natural. Alliances are normal. Even China has alliances. So we have to consider this. I'm giving them time to start re-horizoning and rethinking modernization." That last part was particularly for the Philippines Navy and Coast Guard, which finds itself outgunned and outmanned by China in the disputed waters of the South China Sea. In recent weeks, for instance, Chinese Coast Guard ships have harassed and intimidated Philippines boats on a resupply mission to an outpost in the Spratly Islands. It's these kinds of encounters that's pushing the Philippines into formal alliances and partnerships, like the strategic partnership signed with Australia just last week in Manila. The hope is alliances such as these and naval modernization will prevent unequal showdowns with China on the high seas.
A tense standoff in the South China Sea. Ships from the Philippines and China have increasingly faced off as Beijing asserts its dominance in the region. Manila has sought to bolster support for its defence. Its latest move, signing a strategic partnership with Australia.
We also have important security issues where we have common views about the need to uphold international law. And Australia's position on that will continue to be consistent, as we have always been, including recently over issues relating to the South China Sea.
And to have friends like you and partners like you in that, especially on that subject, is very gratifying and encourages us to continue down that path. So we thank you for that.
China claims sovereignty over nearly all of the South China Sea, cutting into territory that's been internationally recognised as part of other countries, including the Philippines. Reported confrontations have been on the rise, with the Philippines accusing Chinese vessels of illegal and dangerous manoeuvres, including using water cannon and directing military-grade lasers at Filipino ships. Since taking office, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has broken with previous government's policies and bolstered defence ties with the United States. At the recent ASEAN summit in Jakarta, Marcos held talks with the US Vice President Kamala Harris. Her office said she had reaffirmed the United States' ironclad commitment to the Philippines and the role that their alliance plays in a free and open Indo-Pacific. The US has increased its military aid to the Philippines, and the two states held their largest ever joint military drills earlier this year. Exercises that included firing live rounds at sea for the first time. Beijing has warned Manila that strengthening ties with Washington risks dragging the Philippines further into geopolitical strife.
And joining me now for more from Manila is Don McLean-Gill, a lecturer in the Department of International Studies at De La Salle University. Don, what does the recent strategic partnership with Australia do for Manila?
Right. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Barish. It's a true pleasure to converse with you. And, we have to understand that the security partnership between the Philippines and Australia is actually long-standing. It has been composed of a series of MOUs dating back from the late 1990s, and in fact, one of the most crucial ones would be in 2007, particularly in line with the SVFA, and of course. While the Philippines-Australia strategic partnership or security partnership often functioned based against the backdrop of the overall hub-and-spoke system in the Western Pacific, we can now see the willingness of both sides to work independently, bilaterally, as a major pillar of the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. And definitely we could see that both are like-minded, both share several converging interests towards maintaining stability, peace, and inclusivity. And I believe that the Philippines will be able to gain from this based on enhancing its defense cooperation and partnerships with like-minded democratic countries. And of course, Australia has a lot to provide as well in terms of technology transfers and possibly cooperation based on high tech. So we are looking into a multifaceted partnership that is also compatible with the Philippines' growing partnership with the US and Japan.
I did want to speak about that partnership because we've seen in recent months joint naval drills for the first time with the US, Japan, and Australia. We've also seen a tightening of defense relationships with India, and all this in addition to the Philippines being a US security partner, security ally rather. Is there a danger that these alliances, these partnerships provoke Beijing instead of keeping Manila safe?
Well, we have to understand that since the beginning of the Marcos Jr. administration, the ball was already passed to China's court. But unfortunately, there is a huge disconnect between what China says at the political level and what it does on the ground. So, of course, learning from our experiences in the past administration that accommodation is not really the answer towards preserving and protecting Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights. So while we remain open, diplomatic channels remain open, engagements remain open with China. Given that it is our largest neighbor, we cannot just simply cut China off. But still, there is a willingness now, a reinvigorated willingness in Manila to, of course, secure its sovereignty and sovereign rights and territorial integrity as the foremost interest. So what Manila is doing with its defense partners and military modernization is defensive in nature and not in any way aimed at provoking, but of course safeguarding the status quo.
But there's an economic dimension here as well, isn't there, Don? Because China is one of the Philippines' major trading partners. And in January, when President Marcos was in Beijing, for instance, more than $20 billion in investment pledges were agreed to between both sides. How does Manila get tough with an important trade partner?
Well, you're absolutely right. Trade has often been emphasized in terms of a challenge between the two countries. Now, we have to understand two particular things. When it comes to pledges, China's ability to follow through efficiently and transparently with its pledges are not really, they don't get a good grade in terms of that because of the loopholes and the inconsistencies that we have seen even during the time of the former president, the Philippine president, who was quite friendly with Beijing despite the continuous provocations. But now another point that we have to take note of, other than the pledges, is that the Philippines is largely interdependent with China in terms of imports. Okay, so the imports is something that we need to look into, Chinese imports, rather the Philippine imports from China. The goal here is to lessen that dependency in imports. And the need to do that would have to be done very strategically with our partners through equitable FTAs, because redirecting our imports would also be dangerous, as it can also affect the socio-economic fabric of the Philippines with the rising of prices and inflation. So the need to taper down on the dependency on Chinese products and our imports from China would be crucial in lessening our dependency in terms of economics.
We'll leave it there for the time being, but thanks so much for joining us today, Don McLean Gill.